Hello, welcome to this final discussion of Fugitive Prince. We are joined today by the author Janny Wurts of the series The Wars of Light and Shadow. We also have our usual group of friends, Chibipoe and Jared, who will all introduce themselves in just a minute. But today we're doing something slightly different. We've been meeting once every 2 weeks discussing about three chapters. We took a bit of a longer break between chapters, so we ended up reading through the rest of the book. So we are going to be talking full spoilers for the book, as well as maybe focus a lot on the last five chapters because there's so much that happened here. Chibi, would you like to start us off with introductions and then we'll go clockwise from there?
Of course. Excuse me. Chibipoe, just longtime reader and fan, and inhabitant of page chewing forums, and that's all for me. Jared.
I'm Jared. I run the Fantasy Thinker YouTube channel and also haunt the page chewing forums and do a blog there as well.
And Jenny, we have the author who's kind enough to join us, help answer all our questions, especially why talent and and so on. Yes, so a lot happened in the last few chapters. I think the most interesting point for me, but I might be jumping way ahead, was when Lysa hears the man call out to him in prayer from inside the Grimwood. But then we have to talk about the Grimwood first and the dreams of the Drake. So a lot of interesting world stuff also we read about in these five chapters.
Yeah, agreed. um, when we last left off, we had because this we were going back to chapter 10, I believe, since the last discussion we had,
Mm-hmm.
and I found that very interesting. Chapter 10 was actually quite exciting
Mm-hmm.
because you had Kale
Mm.
um, overcoming somebody with magic in a mundane way, and I thought that because magic is, magic users have been powerful and they've been um, feared for the most part,
Mm-hmm.
and so he's overcoming Lorenda and the other Coriani,
Mm-hmm.
and I thought that was I thought that showed that it is possible for somebody to fight against magic users, and it was kind of scary how he ended up destroying
Yeah.
one of the
Yeah.
crystals, and that was kind of freaky how she aged so fast, and
Mm.
um, but it gave us a good taste that people, regular people, can fight against this stuff in some manner.
Mm.
He ended up dying eventually, right? If I'm
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
He did. He did.
but that was a very exciting chapter, very very cool to witness that side of it.
Hmm. Yeah. I I really loved that chapter because I mean, I think first I was really happy that uh, we were talking about last week that Muriel had this like super precise plot set, and then Lirenda brought in like this one little chink, and that ended up unraveling everything. And I was only expecting that Arathon will escape, but it unraveled so much more, and that like the uh, a lot of the clansmen were freed, and like basically a lot of plans were upset because of that one thing, which brought us back to some stuff that was laid down earlier in the beginning of the book, where it said like even nothing that you foresee is set in stone. Any small like a wind blowing the wrong way can change things. And then Lirendum brought such a big made such a big difference to the plan, so that was really cool. And I also really loved how he and how clever Kale was. I think this was also interesting for me because a lot of the cleverness that we've seen so far was largely from Arathon. So it was interesting to see Kale be the one who drove the sort of unraveling of the plot here, like deliberately when he started taking action. So that was really cool too.
Yeah, and then Arathon ends up getting the quartz that was Lorenda's. I think Kale gave it to
Mm-hmm.
uh was it Dakar?
Killed? No, I don't think Dakar was in there. He gave it to the clansman. I think
The clansman, right? Yeah.
yeah, whoever was the most highest ranking clansman there. I think I don't know if clansmen do ranks, but yeah, something like that. He gave it to one
Yeah.
of them, who then eventually brought it to Arathon.
Because I thought I was like, oh, that's got to be significant. Like, what's he going to do with that? Because the other one was destroyed and ended up killing the other Coriani, and so Arathon definitely had something hold over Lorenda's head. Um, and of course, later on, a couple of chapters later, he ends up sending it back to her.
Yeah.
But um, but did he do something with it? That's my question. I don't know. I don't think we know yet.
Yeah, didn't
Uh,
you read the last chapter?
and well, I did, but it didn't. They suspect that definitely something was done with it, but I don't.
He composed 3 songs at the end of the book.
Oh yes.
He did do something.
When he was what what's the word I'm looking for? When he was inspecting the quads for the first time, he asked for his lirant and played a melody, which there it says that Dakar was the only one who started to guess that maybe it wasn't about Keol, it was for he was sort of matching the resonance of the
That's right.
crystal,
Yeah.
which yeah, I love the description of that melody. That was really beautiful. But yeah, I think that probably was what changed the quality of the crystal, it seems like.
Yeah, I believe right after that, we get a scene with Lorinda.
Hmm.
So like pretty much immediately following, and where it's like, yeah, and Lorinda realizes that Arathon has her crystal, and she's kind of annoyed.
Yeah. And then uh, we got some Lysa perspective in these chapters. He what he has this realization that all magic arises from the resonances of the world, and he thinks it's an illusion, like the ones like the Ath Brotherhood apparently uh, wove for him too.
Yeah. Well, I really liked the interplay between Lysaea and Lorinda,
Yes.
and they were trading, they kind of trading barbs on philosophy and decorum and stuff like that. And I thought that was a really good back and forth between those two. It was a um, and Lorinda didn't have her full power because
Mm,
she didn't have the crystal at the time, so she was kind of on the she was at a disadvantage, you know, but she still held her own, and I thought that was pretty significant there, and because it kind of showed that she wasn't going to back down to Moriel later either when she had to
mm,
go there, because she
yeah.
defended herself when Moriel Prime was berating her, and
Mm,
so that was just I really liked the character building, even though she's not on Arathon's side, but I really liked the character building there, and
yeah.
it just lent to her character, and it lent to it made you want to find out more about her, and even though she's not on Arathon's side, she's still somebody you're interested in, and is a full-fledged person that you want to know
Yeah.
about. So I really liked that interplay between them, and I really liked how she stood up for herself there. Whether or not she's going to be, we have yet to find out her, of course, what role she's going to play coming up. But I suspect it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, yeah. I almost was rooting for her in that last chapter. I know that her task is to go capture Arathon, but I'm like,
Yeah,
just for like half a second, I want you to succeed in
yeah,
what you do. Because like I really the same thing, Jared. I really like that she stood up to uh Moriel. And I think what became really clear to me, and maybe Johnny, you could tell us more about, how you wove these two different sources of like ways that they do magic, at least the two that we've met so far. But the Koreani ones really what subjugate free will a lot, right? I think it I was talking about how upset I was when Moriel just she's like, yeah, we're going to just block that volcano without really thinking about the consequences too much. But they really subjugate free will, but the um fellowship sorcery, on the other hand, it's about asking for permission. Dakar makes that joke that we're going to lose Arathon because we can't find a sweet tempered tree. So like those two are so vastly different, and it makes me dislike the Koreani order quite a bit. But I feel like there might be more to it than just what I'm reading into it. So, and Jani, could you tell us more about those two sources of magic, like as far as we've gotten in the books, how you made them so different, and yeah.
You really have to look back in history to look at where the Koreathin got their origins.
Hmm.
They were originally a benevolent secret society that was working to preserve civilizations and save knowledge and also save underrepresented people that were being trampled over by corporate culture and colonial culture empires that were
Hmm.
spreading between worlds. So they were originally dedicated to humanitarian aid for people that were refugees
Hmm.
and to rescue their knowledge. Where things began to go south for them was when they began to play politics and get more powerful and reach for more power. And when they discovered cultures that had magic, they wanted some of that for themselves. So they started appropriating power and knowledge from some of the cultures that they were storing, and some of the methodology that they used was not very nice.
Hmm.
So they ended up with an attitude that suggested if our cause is for the greater good and our cause is humanitarian, we don't care particularly about the means by which we get what we get, because the
Hmm.
greater good says we can save more people. So they were very humanity oriented. When the civilizations, which there were three major factors that went to war, basically blew up, the refugee remnants, which were about 20,000 people, wound up coming to Athera. And in the Third Age, when mankind applied to get residency on Athera, they had to comply with the Fellowship's compact.
Hmm.
And the Coriathane were caught in the mix. Their choice was settle on this world where the resonance is very high and your magic is going to be 10 times more effective than it ever was anywhere else. So
Hmm.
you become more powerful, but all of your records, all of your technology, all of your cultural library is now proscribed. You have to step into a culture that was shaped by the Moors that would preserve the world for the Paravian survival. So there's a huge resentment on the higher echelons of the Coriathane as to what they had to give up to live here. And they can't really get off. They can't get away because the way they got there was technological spaceships and they can't
Hmm.
rebuild that. So the Prime has knowledge that the rest of the Order does not. And the Order on Athera broke into two halves. There were the lower echelons, or the gray ribbons, that were humanitarian, and they still do the healing. They still do the humanitarian interventions. There were the red ranks that were administrative, and they are a little more shady. And the
Hmm.
Prime holds knowledge that the entire rest of the Order is ignorant of, because it's proscribed by the compact. Now we approach, how do they do their magic? They don't really have any of their own. They stole it. They also take what they have and they amplify it through crystal. Crystal is piezoelectric. And you know that quartz crystals in your radios and your record players and your quartz can store and give off electrons. And when it's flexed or it's heated or it's put under pressure or it's in any way messed with by anything, any other outside force, it tends to give off or store electrons. And they are ordered because of the crystalline structure of the crystal. Those things can be ordered. So records can be stored in the crystals. So basically, your personal crystal for the Coriathane would have records and affinities and ties to the person that carried it. And it would be used to hold or release energy, just as quartz does, only this is ethera. So it taps into the magic of the world here by resonance exactly like all the others do. The difference is that the Coriathane can't function on a higher function without that crystal assist. And you will see as the series goes on, the Fellowship also work with crystals, but very differently than the Coriathane do. The Coriathane consider them a tool. They don't consider them to have consciousness. They don't consider them to be anything more than a thing. And so they don't clear the crystal. They don't allow it to talk back. They don't allow it any latitude whatsoever. They impose their order upon it, and the crystal can't fight back. So does that answer your question a little bit there?
Yeah, I think so. Do we know yet? I mean, sorry, I say I think so as my default, but yes, I did understand. Thanks, Janny. I have a follow up. Do we know yet who they stole the power from? Was it something stolen from the world that they came before, or did they steal in this world power that they should not have?
Did you read the short story Sundering Star?
Not yet, no.
Okay, that will detail some of it.
Okay.
The series will also unfold some of it. So be patient and keep reading. You'll get there, but also the Sundering Star is absolutely going to give you a way back in history look. Sundering Star took place over 10,000 years in the past.
Okay. Yeah.
Is now a good time to read that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
Fugitive Prince is a fine time to read that. You're safe reading anything but Black Bargain. You want to hold Black Bargain until the finish of this arc. And there are a lot of sleepers in Fugitive Prince. You're going to be absolutely mind blown because just about every single scene and event, an individual that's impacted by what goes on in this book will come around to bite you. And there's scenes that you will have witnessed and you won't see the full breadth of what was really happening until you pass down the line. You know, when Marin climbs the tower and he overhears those council members, and there's a guy from Erdane and the high priest are kind of, and they say, we don't care about this religion, but we're going to support it because it'll follow our agenda and we will give you money and we will give you, well, there's roots flying every which way from just about every scene. So all these events are going to come around again, bigger in ways that you won't expect.
Yeah, and this book felt similar to Curse of the Mistwraith in that way, in that there was seen to be a lot of events in here that are going to have significance later on, and that we don't know the full impact yet. Because there was a lot of information in this book.
And all of Dakars' prophecies that he did on Capter, all of the fact that Capter existed, the fact that the Fellowship searched for the Paravians and didn't find them, and they sent Arthon off on a goose chase. The Grimwards.
Yes.
There's just a massive, massive amount of stuff packed into these pages, and it's very much like Curse of the Mistwraith. The difference is that you're lifting to worldview here. So where the original book was building the foundation to launch the series and get you invested in the characters and the conflict and deal with the subject of history is written by the victor. This one is going to go into worldview. So by the time you finish all 5 books in this arc, you will know what the foundational high ground is for all of the various factions. And you'll
Mm.
know a great deal more about the interaction of the world. And you will, by the end of it, realize you're definitely not in Kansas anymore. This is not European aristocracy in any way, shape, or form. So your own prejudices there will trip you hard, as was intended.
Oh yeah.
Nice. So this book, I thought, read or like was structured slightly differently, or maybe I didn't notice the structure. We know the first, I guess, ships and war host were one book, so we had a sort of like big middle and then a big end. But this one felt quiet both in the middle and in the end. We saw a lot, and I think this may have been the first time that we saw a prophecy that did not sort of play out within the book, right? Like with Jarrett seeing Arathon hanged. I don't know if he's like fully past that or if that's for a later date, but yeah, I was curious. This read a lot more to me like the first book of a series than Curse of the Mistwraith did. Is it because it's the beginning of the arc? It felt like a much more quieter book overall.
It gears back because it is an arc start.
Mm-hmm,
This is the launching pad for so much more.
mm-hmm,
And as far as Jarrett's prophecy, what he dreamed, you need to pay attention to the language very, very carefully because
mm-hmm,
there's all kinds of Chekhov's guns buried in this volume
mm,
everywhere. And you aren't going to see them all. You don't need to obsess over it because what you miss here is going to bite you on the ass later. But when each volume that goes and unfolds more and more, you'll look on the events in this book and you'll see totally different things. Same, you can go all the way back to Mistwraith and see totally different things.
mm. Yeah.
So yeah, seeing that Enchantress die the way she did puts a whole different spin on what happened when Alera was given longevity and then
Mm,
Luhane intervened so that she wasn't stuck on that track. So there's ramifications falling backwards and forwards everywhere you turn.
mm,
Deliberately, that was the way it was designed. So it needs a whole horde of readers picking it apart to see all the bits.
yeah.
Yeah. We also had a the Grimswood, which that place was kind of crazy, right?
Mm, yeah.
And um, you had like what were those hunting cats, or whatever they were
Mm.
that were
The name started with an S, but I
Seared
yeah
Lewin.
yeah.
Seared Lewin.
Sir
yes
Lewin. Yes.
um and we kind of start to find out how crazy powerful some of these dragons are
Yeah.
when they go into the Grimswood and um so it seemed like Arathon was kind of shutting himself down as they were going through this area. Um, so was he being overwhelmed with the power in this area, or was he worried about something else?
You
I'm kind of
realize what it was that you saw, what the Grimward is.
that's what I'm trying to figure out.
Okay. The
It's
Fellowship
definitely seems
had
to be tied
very,
into the
very, very
curriculum.
powerful protections around it so people wouldn't stray.
Mhm.
And Asandir left a hole in it to allow them to escape.
That's what it was.
Arathon noticed when they stepped through that they weren't traveling in a straight line anymore. They were traveling in a spiral. And he noticed that there were bits and pieces of the landscape being altered by what they were thinking. So he was seeing constellations from Dasan Eller when he navigated on his homeworld. So he realized very quickly this is an interactive interface. And
Hmm.
it could be really dangerous because the other thing he said before he passed out was everything is wound from one thread. One consciousness is creating this, all of it. And it's interacting with our thoughts. It's interacting So the caution that they were given, don't pick anything, don't burn anything, don't destroy anything. The minute you do that, you've interacted with it and altered it of your own accord. Now you're going to be subject to what happens here. And what you are seeing as you progress through this spiraling towards the center is fragments of history, historical
Yeah.
creatures that are gone, that are actually extinct. But here they are killing people, but they're not killing the people who didn't interact with the consciousness that's driving it. And what you discover at the very middle of this thing is you're interacting with a unrequited dragon haunt. It is a ghost, and
Dragon Hunt. Yeah.
there's a resonant chamber in the center of that skull that acts as a portal. So this is a dead dragon that never left. It's a ghost.
And the soldiers that went in there didn't have that same kind of caution.
Right. They
paid
interacted with the
they paid
reality. They
price.
killed
Yeah.
something, or they
Yeah.
built a fire, or whatever they did. It made them subject to it. So what you will come to learn as you learn more about the dragons is, oh yeah, they're really powerful. Even their unrequited haunts and their skulls are powerful beyond anything we can imagine. And if they didn't plunge into salt water when they died, they didn't go into the sea, then there's going to be a haunt still tied to where the bones fell.
Yeah, they almost seem like a magical law unto themselves. These powerful.
They are, and they're very terrifying. Those
Yeah.
Grimwards are very terrifying. There's a fixed number of them on the planet. They are guarded.
Mm.
And if you go back in history, I could tell you who the dragon was that died there, how that dragon was killed, what date it was dead, and what date it was Grimwarded, and how it was tied to a possibly living mate. That had huge ramifications, massive ones. So you're beginning to see just the inkling of the dragons.
Yes, that was exciting. I was like, oh, good. We're starting to see this stuff. So
Are all Grimwards dragon remnants, or are they protecting things that could break the world apart in other ways too?
There's plenty of things like that, but they're not Grimwards. A Grimward is definitely a dragon haunt.
Okay.
It's a dead dragon. And there are certainly other things that the Fellowship are guarding. I don't necessarily go into them. Briefly, you'll get snapshots of it, except that you happen to notice that a sorcerer as powerful as Asandir is always in a hurry.
Mm.
He's always going on to deal with something else. And he's passing through the human crisis on these world. And what is driving him? What else is going on?
yeah,
So just keep reading. You're standing on a massive, massive, massive weight of history here
Mm.
that the series itself couldn't possibly encompass.
Mm.
So you're starting to get little inklings of it, but you're only going to learn what the characters learn.
Makes sense. Yeah,
Yeah.
I have been wondering what's been keeping the Fellowship so busy. They keep saying they don't have enough people to do everything that they need to do. So yeah, what else are they dealing with, right? So,
right. And Asanda gets injured in this one, right?
mm, yeah,
When did that happen? That happened when he was trying to get
the captain of the group.
Captain out of the Grimswood.
Yeah, yeah.
He had to go in
Or
there and he had to freeze the dream. He had to
Mm.
freeze the dream that this dragon haunt in order to deliver what people were made it to the center alive.
mm,
Yeah,
And just going through that thing with his level of power and to be able to stop the whole thing cold. There's going to be more. This is the foundational glimpse of what a Grimward is. There will be more as you go.
yeah, that chapter was really exciting. My favorite bit was when we were told that the volcano, yeah, I guess the area around the volcano, if I remember correctly, the hot rocks, that's where the drakes would get rid of the scales on their wings, whatever. I'm messing up the words, but like the dragons used to roll around in that heat. So that, yeah, so they were big, they were powerful. Yeah, they seem to be some awesome dragons that I'd like to get to know more. What else happened in that chapter? We had all of that happened in Fire and Sword, right? No, the Grimwood has its own chapter.
Yeah.
And then, which was the one? Was Fire and Sword when Kaol takes over the ships? Yeah, I think
That's
it was.
chapter 10.
Yeah, that was chapter 11, Fire and Sword. That's when they went to rescue the minstrel.
Yeah, that's when
Right.
And
Arthon.
Arathorn seemed dead set on rescuing this guy, which was a risky venture because it could give him away, and of course Dakar was against it,
Mhm.
at first, and but that was interesting. It was a nice little uh, thematic thing there. It's kind of like a freedom of speech type thing.
Yeah.
You want to have these. You don't want to have the minstrels and the bards um, stamped down or whatever, and
Mm.
so that they couldn't sing their songs and what have you. And so that
He's
was
the Arathon is the master bard.
he's the master bard, right? And so
He's in charge of all of that.
he
And
doesn't. Yeah,
you know that was the same minstrel appeared in Curse of the Mistwraith
yeah.
that got
Chibipoe
himself
mentioned
beat up for
that.
singing the wrong ballad in the wrong place. He didn't learn.
Yeah. Yep. But yeah, no, I liked that though, how they stood up for that concept. And but I think the minstrel ended up with an injury, right?
Mm.
If I'm remembering correctly. Um,
His hands burned.
yeah, so now he can
Tell
only sing.
stories. He
Yeah,
became
tell
a
stories.
storyteller.
Yep.
And he had an interesting first epic story. I something to do with how light was called down, but I forget what it was. But that was really cool. But then he lost his audience immediately, so he had some work to do apparently. Um, what was I going to say about that? Yeah, I think you covered it, Jared. I really appreciated the theme of free speech. If you stop someone from singing these songs, then you're basically going to prevent all satire, and and there was one we saw similar consequences when one of them was complaining that there's no need for this haste. Those that captain has been lost for or the whole group of 40 has been lost for 3 months. It's not going to help them much more if we ruin ourselves trying to get there, right? And then they basically throw him out and say, like, don't come back here. Um so you can't say anything. You can basically not speak your mind anymore in Lysa, under Lysa's rule.
Yeah, and this is part of the we're starting to see Lysa as put his stamp down on the populace and wanting to control and
You have to realize that the bards and Arathon as master bard, they didn't just go and sing. It wasn't just free speech. They also were the keeper of records and the keeper of law.
Mm.
They were the keeper of various regional customs and law. So for Lysa's religion to start burning them, now it makes a little more sense. It was a little bit more than let's just go rescue this guy. It was there needs to be a check rein on destroying the keepers of the records and the law. So your free
Mm.
singers were a presence that moved around, but that kept a certain amount of continuity and order and could resolve disputes and could. So their role was just a little bit bigger than just entertainment in the taverns.
Hmm.
You saw that with Arathon in the prior book.
with Halaron, right?
Yeah, and you saw
Yeah.
that he understood the local laws about the marriage that took place in Merry or by the Sea when the fisherman got maimed. that if that
Mm,
boy lost his livelihood, it would have changed the marriage you saw in Vastmark, that he
mm,
understood the local customs in Vastmark.
mm.
So there was more to your free singers than just somebody who entertained people.
God. Are they the soul keepers, or are they one of the keepers of law?
They aren't the only ones, no. And they wouldn't carry a whole ton of authority.
Mm,
The authority went up the chain a different way,
hmm,
but they were a means to maintain continuity.
got it.
Yeah, similar to how that guardsman in J-Lot, I think it was, when Arathon's like, yeah, so the charter's hardly legal, and the guardsman was like, swords not paper, we'll decide that.
Mm,
When they were talking about Lysa laying claim to Avenor
Mm-hmm.
and back in ships.
Mhm.
And but yeah, like I agree. I guess like Jenny said, if you want to start up a new system of order, you don't want someone running around, roaming around who remembers how can be like, yeah, no, that's not how that works, and
mm,
contradict you. So yeah, there's a bit of a um, what's the word, you know, ulterior motive, and just it's like, oh well, they're just telling stories that we don't want repeated. It's like it's not just the stories you're wanting to stamp out.
Yeah, right.
hmm,
Yeah, and that ties into what Lesay is trying to seemingly achieve here, because he spouts out some pretty villainous words in the next chapter, and he's like to the enchantress, he's saying he's warning her to take heed lest your kind cross my wishes again. As a kind of like your villainous type of dialogue there, and he also goes into he wants to win the loyalty of every city in Ethera, and he'll bring down whoever he needs to, who obstructs the growth of human destiny. Um, so his agenda is clearly set out with his dialogue to other people. Even though in private we see him breaking down a few times, but uh, so that was really laid out in chapter 13 there.
yeah, yeah. And I think the the bit that was most interesting to me there was the divine retribution when he called down lightning and killed
Yeah,
the
that was
It was a
people.
major warning because he
Yeah.
was telling her, don't compromise the loyalty
Mm,
of my people. And he did the same with his wife.
mm,
Don't compromise the loyalty and come between me. Don't have anything come between me and what needs to be accomplished here. So it was a severe warning.
mhm.
But what would it take to make a Coriathane think they couldn't just walk in and do it?
mm,
Yeah,
mm.
it was a
Interesting.
horrifying display of power he put on there, and Lorenda was quite taken aback by it all. And, uh, that
Yeah.
was outstanding.
There was one bit that I highlighted in a later chapter where let me see if I can find it. Oh, that was in the very beginning of the chapter. Yeah, when he says, "Oh yeah, okay." Uh, Indeed, what better way to seduce a mortal will from right action than to cloak perfect evil in a seamless, evocative beauty? Not that Lysa is perfect evil, but he's thinking about the beauty of the source of creation, right? Like he's having this thought to himself about the source of magic, and he's feeling despair that what he accomplishes will never happen um, because if music and grand harmony and clean balance framed his powers, then Lysa rocked on the edge of the abyss. So he's having this moment of despair, and then he has this thought about cloaking perfect evil in in seamless evocative beauty, which Lysa is not perfect evil, but all his negativity is cloaked in his I guess we joked about his golden hair before, but he's surrounded constantly about with the light and the golden hair and so on, and everybody's thinking about how beautiful he looks, and that's one of the things that manipulates them into giving their loyalty. I think so. Yeah, I thought it was ironic that Lysa thinks this to himself. And did we? Yeah, I guess I mentioned it briefly, but when Lysa's, a lot happens in that beginning of that last chapter. Was it the beginning of the last chapter? But when he rescues the person who eventually becomes the commander of his ground host, he basically begs Lysa to deliver him from darkness, and then the next moment he's there. He's released from the Grimwood. So, did Lysa hear a prayer? Is he really
Nope.
accomplishing godhood? Like, what is,
Nope.
or is it the
Coincidence.
mystery?
Coincidence.
it, it,
Yeah, because it was
Asandir delivered.
yeah,
Asandir
yeah,
was
yeah,
the
he
one
did.
who. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Asandir delivered him from the Grimwood. Had nothing to do with the stupid prayer.
No, I understand that. I know that Lysa had nothing to do with his release. I was curious whether Lysa heard um, the man, or if this was something darker. Like, I mean, I wrote down, was it the mistrate? And then later when the guy shows up, I was like, okay, maybe he's just, and talked about how he was praying to Lysa. I thought maybe that's what Lysa heard, but yeah, I don't think we know yet. Do we?
Keep reading.
Okay.
I did have a question.
Mhm.
In the it was chapter 13 again, but it was in the last section of crossing. It is mentioned that Traith, one of the sorcerers, right?
Mhm.
It was mentioned that if Traith's faculties were still whole, or if this crisis had been met by any other member of the Fellowship, Felleran's disfigured might be ameliorated. So that's the minstrel with the burnt hands.
Mhm.
Um, so not all the sorcerer's powers are equal, because it seems that Traith doesn't have the ability to.
Traith is damaged.
He's damaged, right? And I wasn't sure exactly which way he was, what way he was damaged at that point.
Southgate. He closed Southgate.
Okay, he's the one that closed Southgate.
He's crippled
That's right. Okay, all
that
right.
moment.
Yeah, I needed to be reminded of that. Yeah. All right, that was a question I had there.
Yeah, I loved Trait in this book. I love that we got a lot more of him in this book. But also, I don't know if you can answer this question for us yet, Janny, but there's a raven on the cover of either, I think it was Warhost or was it Ships? One of those has a raven. So I thought Trait will play a significant role there, but he doesn't that much. But in this book, Trait was with us quite a bit. Yeah, Warhost of Vastmark. That's Traits Raven, right? On that cover, the paperback cover.
Yeah.
Okay.
But there's a significance to the Raven
Mm-hmm.
that will unfold over the series. Just watch very carefully when it's capitalized and when it's male, or if it's capitalized and it's female and it's not capitalized and it's male.
Mm.
There's a thread of correlation running through. Most readers miss it. They conflate what's actually happening. So there's a greater, and then there's an aspect. So what you're looking at with Trace Raven is an aspected being.
Mm.
So just watch that.
Okay.
And it will have significance. It will play out, some of it in this arc. Definitely in this arc, you'll begin to see the greater and the lesser.
Hmm.
So yeah,
Cool.
Traith became crippled, and that that aspected raven was bonded to him to help him through
Hmm. I see.
because
Okay.
he's missing a chunk of his faculties.
Hmm. Makes sense. And these on the cover, are these the
Right.
Sedluid? Yeah. Okay.
It's a gargoyle. It's a carved statue.
Hmm.
But yes,
Cool. And what else? I think we had many questions for you about the way Talit died.
Oh, earlier, yeah.
Yeah. Well, like when
I,
when we get to talk to Janny about this book,
I
we've got to ask her.
I was crushed. I was mad at you.
Oh yeah.
I didn't like that she died, but
well, you have to look at the bigger picture here.
yeah.
Whose moral high ground is she messing with?
Oh yeah. No, she definitely.
So, and who had her assassinated?
Hmm.
Who did it? Who actually did the command? And I believe at the end of Fugitive Prince, you realize it wasn't Lysa.
Yeah.
He
Right.
wasn't even there.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was. Who was that?
It was one of the people that was it the priest
Was it one of
that
the people in that meeting?
yeah,
Yeah.
I thought so.
And it was. I don't know if it was a high priest there, or if it was one of the other guys that was there.
Two for
I'm
two
gonna have to go
seventy
back and read
five.
that meeting again because there was a
Yeah.
lot going on in
There
there.
was a lot going on in that meeting, a lot, and it's going to emerge.
Yeah, and I really loved how we got the story of that meeting that with uh what's his name
Man?
man
Yeah.
doing those doing the spy bit I thought that was an excellent vehicle of a way to tell that information to us, and that was outstanding
Yeah.
how you did pull that off. I thought that was really great. And there was another thing that I noticed throughout this book in particular is that you were using a lot of scrying for storytelling purposes rather than just you know rehashing something that's already happened or you know or looking back as like a dream-like thing where you were actually using scrying to actually further the story along, and
You're
I
going
love
to
how you did that.
find you're going to find every single scene in this book runs on more than one layer.
Hmm.
There's more than one thing happening in every single scene. And that's where people are unprepared for the depth of the series. If you go back and you look at Mistwraith from the telescopic view of the end of arc 2 or the end of arc 3, you're going to see more of those layers. It becomes a whole different story. And when you see the final finale at Song of the Mysteries, you're going to go back and go, 1,000 times more was packed into those scenes in every book than you had the vantage point and the perspective to perceive. So yeah, you're starting to notice there's two things going on in a scene. Well, there's
Hmm.
usually more than two.
Yeah, well,
But
I'm at
when
least getting
when
two, but
yeah, when you have the perspective to see what you're really seeing, you'll see probably up to 9 layers going on.
that's excellent.
It's going to be fun because if you really like a book that does that, there aren't too many in the field that do that to that degree. You got to really pick and choose to find them. Most storytelling is very linear.
Right.
Goes like a snowball. You start with a seed and it keeps rolling. This one is very much tied to what viewpoint are you seeing it through.
Very
Yeah.
much so.
But I did enjoy that of the two things that at most two things that even I noticed in most scenes. When especially the one with Satvir and was it Karadmon, when we see what's happening with them, but also Satvir's are telling us what's happening with Arathon and the others. So we have a way to know about two things. Like I like that device in general, what Jared said, the scrying slash yeah, I think what Satvir does is also scrying, right? Just that particular device I really enjoyed quite a bit, that we know what's happening in more than one place.
Hmm. Yeah, we have yeah, we also have the another explanation of like the individual magic harmonies that go through each person, each
Mm,
everything really. It's like the energy. Each thread of power must sing exactly on key. The energy colors of each step in conjuring match to the individual, and that was when Seth Fair was trying to get us in there to you know
mm,
to relax and heal
yeah.
before he takes on more, and using his mage sight and stuff like that. Uh, so there was a lot of explanation there about magic, and we get more about a little bit more about how it works with all this with the sorcerers and stuff like that. So there's a lot of information packed in there, and I'm sure there's a couple layers. But one thing that was mentioned again that I hadn't heard about in a while was this Black Rose prophecy,
Mm.
and I need somebody to remind me of that.
Oh, that's the one where if Arthon embraces uh, kingship, uh, the fellowship can be restored to seven, or they won't be restored to seven unless uh,
Unless,
yeah, and I think there is a black rose will grow in Rathane. There are three things that are tied together, and they all have to be, and that will happen if I remember correctly when Arathon embraces um, kingship.
Davian the betrayer shall hear no reason, nor bow to the law of the major balance, and neither shall the fellowship be restored to seven until the black rose grows wild in the vales of Dan Ramon.
Is that so? Arathon's kingship, is that tied to something else then, or is that
The
also the black?
briar will take root on the day
Yeah.
Erethan
Okay. Yeah.
Helen embraces kingship.
okay, and so um, and he hasn't embraced kingship yet because he's still trying to keep away from Lysa because of the curse. Um, so that is, of course, that's like part of the major conflicts going on here. Uh, so it leads a lot to wonder how we're going to get to that point,
Mm,
which is fascinating because you can't, you know, you can't like you can't imagine a scenario yet where Arathon's going to be in a position to be able to do that. He's
yeah.
really in dire straits
Yeah.
when it comes to this curse. A
It really is.
lot of tension there.
And I had to skim the last bit of the chapter. I'll go back and read it properly once we finish. But I did read the news items, as Jared calls them, at the end. So yeah, like I believe the time jump is going to be 15 years, or at least we're looking at a 15-year long thing
Yeah,
at the end of the book. So I wonder if that's the length of the arc or what we're going to see in the next book. Yeah, it's been interesting, Janny. Not that I want an answer from you yet, but we know we have about 500 years to deal with. And so far, we've covered what, about 25, 30? I haven't been keeping track, but not even that much, right? 10 years since they came to Athera.
I think it's been about 10. Yeah.
Are you referring to the elemental scrying the fellowship does to see what happens in an interim period?
In the, do you mean in Curse?
No,
No,
in
they haven't.
Fugitive Prince.
No, that's Grant's conspiracy.
That's Grand Conspiracy.
Oh, okay.
Your time jump stepping into Grand Conspiracy won't be too huge.
Okay.
Yeah. I think the 15-year thing was that was how long Lorenda's plan was going to take to
Right.
To
come to
capture
Yes.
fruition.
Anderson.
That
Yes.
was
Mm.
her
S-
plan that she put forward to
That
Moriel
was the
Prime.
Mhm.
reference. She
Yeah.
has to wait
Yeah,
15 years to make it mature. And when you start Grand Conspiracy, you'll see why.
yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. Okay.
Which was like a pretty bold compared to how much, because I know Moriel Prime wanted the solid plan, and she was like, "Well, it's 15 years. That's a little, you know, a bit of a drawback, but go ahead and proceed."
Yeah.
So that was
She
very
she also
interesting.
has to live for 15 more years, right, to see it through. But she started training someone else meanwhile, it seems like. So if Lorenda's plan fails, then she still has to train another successor. So maybe it's like, yeah, cool. I'll live that long.
Yeah, yeah, we can only see. Um, I am
Oh yeah.
eager to find out
Mhm.
uh, more about Alara. We didn't get too much of her
Yeah.
in this book. The first chapter, it was a lot of her, but the we didn't get too much of her after that. She was a little busy raising or helping to raise this child of prophecy,
Yeah.
um, and so I'm hoping we're going to get some more of her uh, coming up.
Yeah. I like that. Oh, I didn't finish my question from earlier, Johnny. Or like so basically we're breaking up 500 years, but so far we've been dealing with pretty small gaps. So I'm just generally curious how that will play out. Like, there must be a period of peace or general stillness for us to get to 500 years, it seems like. Or yeah, I think that has been an aspect of the series that's been really intriguing for me, because I think the other long series I read before this one has like of similar length as Wheel of Time, and I think all the action plays out in what, a year and a half, 2 years. That's the length of time we deal with. But here we're talking 5 centuries, which feels in a lot of ways like the right amount of time for a story of this magnitude to play out on. But so far we've seen relatively small time jumps, which makes sense because we're still sort of like setting out the foundation. So I'm very curious to see how we deal with the movement of time later on in the series.
You'll see. That's another read and find out.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Was-
I can't wait.
yeah. Was there anything else that I know we we have to talk about? Jared and Arathon's conversation. That was awesome.
Yes, he was really laying
Yeah.
into Arathon. Uh,
Yeah.
Basically, stop whining.
I love I love the relationship between them. I know we don't get a lot, but the snippets that we do get, I love. Like, I eat it up. It's so brilliant. And I think we met also a couple of wives of clansmen, like Jared's wife. I We only met her for a few pages. I think twice, right? First when Jared has his vision, and then second when Sethweir comes to visit her to name Jared's successor. Both times, I loved her so much just within a few pages. So you introduced a lot of characters in this book, Johnny, that within a short span, I really liked them a lot.
She'll
I
be
forget
back. She'll be back.
who I forget who the second character is, but I remember thinking, oh, she's awesome too. And
Well,
in,
Phelan grows up in this book.
oh, her
Oh,
it was someone new in this book. She's one of she's a wife of one of the, I forget, was it Maynard's not married, right? Or at least I don't think we've met his wife, but somebody.
His grandmother, Dame Dar,
oh, uh, well, Mayern has to take
she's referred
hold,
to.
Hmm.
Dame Dar, his
right?
grandmother's referred to. You will meet her.
Okay.
But he also has to take charge of a child too
Oh
Yes.
yeah.
from the clans. And so I,
Ian Far, yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So
Hmm.
well, Yeah, that's curious. I wonder
All
what they
those
do with that.
characters
Yeah,
will come around again,
Okay.
that's
bigger, definitely.
Yeah.
Dame Dar is awesome.
Cool.
Yeah, you
and
have a lot to look forward to with her.
Favorite.
and we also just got little snippets of the former children from in Ships of Merior,
Mm,
the brother and sister there.
Yeah, they're grown up
yeah.
now.
Yep, they're grown up now, which is fascinating to see. Like, because Jarrett in the first book was a kid, really. So
Mm-hmm.
now we're seeing him. It's over 10 years later. So he's a full grown man, and we're seeing him really come into his own
Yeah.
with his character, and how it's interesting because he's not in the same scenes with Arathon a lot. So from Arathon's perspective, he still sees him as that kid that
Mm,
he first met. But of course, Jarrett's been through a lot, and he's a very important figure within his clan and stuff like that. So he's I've seen it. I like the development of his character because we really see how he's changed over the years and how he's taken charge, and he's really a leader.
mm,
And I think some of uh his what he went through helped forge him to be that leader. So
yeah. Yeah. No, I remember thinking, well, okay. So first I have a question for you both, Chibipoe and Jared. Is it, I find it hard to wrap my head around when we meet a character as a child and then we see them as a grown up. It's hard for me to stop thinking of them as the child and like, oh, they're doing all these grown up things now. Kind of like, when I go back home and meet my nephew and he's deadlifting 200 pounds and last time I saw him he was a kid. So it it is like, watching someone you got really attached to grow up. That's been really a cool aspect of the fact that the series spanned so many years. But also I keep thinking of them as the child, which may be intentional. Do you guys read like that, or is it just a me thing?
well, I would say that's a life thing when
Yeah.
when you don't see somebody for a long time, you expect you have a certain impression
Mm,
in your head, and then but you're seeing them 10 years later, and they've had so much more experiences and
yeah.
that you haven't thought of. And yeah,
Yeah.
so it's pulled off in here very well because you're even though we've only been reading these books for less than a year,
Yeah.
we still getting the feeling of seeing these people 10 years later. And
It's
it's
one of my personal beefs with fantasy books that once a character is introduced, they stay the same. You
right.
know,
Yeah.
the young kid that's the chosen one that's still now gone through two major wars and has left home and been on his own and had mentors that died, and he's still going behind the bush and sulking like an 18-year-old. So if you look carefully at the character arcs in the series, they all grow. Kale is
Mm,
not the same character that he was in Curse of the Mistwraith.
Yeah.
The events and the people he's met, his impact with Arathon has changed him.
mm,
It changes all of them. So yeah, these kids are growing up and they are becoming their own people. And I don't know as Arathon really looks at Jared as being the child anymore.
mm,
He's much more playing his cards to get him the hell away
Mhm.
mm.
so that his father's fate doesn't become his.
Yeah. And that relationship is also interesting because I think, if I'm not mistaken, Arathon has met Jared exactly as many times as we have, right? Every time they meet, it's been on the page that you know of. So he's treating Jared with respect, like with the respect that his age deserves each time. He's not saying, you're the little boy and you've not grown up now, which also, is something that we tend to do as people. Like, we know someone as kids, we sometimes tend to treat them even after they've grown up. If they're a child that we watched growing up, sometimes it's hard to stop thinking of them as the child, right? So that relationship, how it plays out, that's also really interesting in that sense. Um, yeah, I have a question, a writing question for you on that, Jenny. Like, did you have to plot how these characters would play out, especially? And I suppose, yeah, that's the other thing that I'm curious about. When a lot of these people have shorter lifespans than Arathon's going to have, so I guess we'll meet different characters once, or like, a lot of deaths are probably going to happen during the time span of these books, so a lot of characters need to grow up from childhood to adulthood. So what was it like to plan entire lifespans? Because to your earlier point, I feel like in a lot of books, once we meet a character, they're sort of fully formed and they more or less stay within the parameters of that character, of how we first meet them. They don't change a whole lot, or if they do, that's part of their arc. It's not because we've spent a lot of time behind the scenes, or like they've spent a lot of time outside of when we meet them growing up, right? So yeah, I guess, how did you plan their lives?
In knowing the entire character's arc, so I can carry forward and know what these characters that you're just meeting in this book, or that you're just meeting as a child, or one that was just born in this book, where they're going to end up. So what I did was I made spreadsheets,
Hmm.
and the time and the date are on the left and the characters run across the top. So I can see that if this character is going to play a major role going forward into this arc, they need to appear a couple of times or 3 times as they
Hmm.
develop, so that you have a stake in what happens, so that they aren't going to be introduced once and then disappear until the major moment. I'm going to build them.
Hmm.
I'm going to build them very slowly and very carefully. So each of those encounters is going to grow them, and it's going to grow your appreciation of them. And even one like Sylphan Evan that just walks on, you don't know much about him except he's a captain from Hampshire. He's rather arrogant. He's enamored of Lysa because he thinks Lysa rescued him from a Grimswood. He's blind to the religion of light. That's going to grow into something incredibly else. So anything that walks on stage and gets a name is probably going to go somewhere. So yeah, I did try to stage it so that you saw those characters at intervals to
Hmm.
build up what they became. So when their major moment is and the plot actually pivots on what they do, you're going to have an investment. Watch how Marin developed
Hmm.
from the very first
Yeah.
book in Ships of Marior to what he's doing now, and then add on the rest of his family. The rest of his family are all going to play major roles. Each of his brothers, each of their wives, each of their children. So I just had to plan for it. That's part of why this series took 50 years.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it helps that I started with the concepts when I was 18,
Hmm.
and I didn't publish until I was in my 30s.
Hmm.
So the characters grew with me as I worked with them behind the scenes for years and years and years. So I brought more life perspective as I kept writing in my 40s and my 50s. That life perspective also went into building them into what they are, because that's the problem with a lot of, I think, epic fantasies that writers start in their 20s and they write like gangbusters and they spit out the first 5 books really quick, and then they hit a wall
Hmm.
because what was cool in your 20s isn't cool anymore. What you envisioned was the story, you've outgrown it. So I designed a series that I was not going to outgrow. The characters are going to, some of them will live on to old age, and you will see it happen.
Hmm.
So building in that perspective changes, life changes, because you can't produce an 11-book series in 5 years unless you're writing incredibly shallow.
Hmm.
The series is designed to be durable.
Yeah, and it shows too. That's an interesting point about the beginnings of the religion of light, uh, because everything has that starting point, but then it always grows into something else. And I'm fascinated to see how that progresses as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
See, everything is predicated on change. Change is going to happen. Things are going to evolve. And you look at our history going back 500 years, there's still feuds going on in our history that are as old as that or older.
Mm.
Thousands of years.
Mhm.
You pass those hatreds to the next generation, and then they morph into something else, and then another atrocity happens. So that snowballing effect as history moves forward from its roots,
Yeah, and we've seen a little bit of that already.
you're going to see a lot more
Yeah.
of it.
So
Mm. Yeah.
that is
Um,
good.
Yeah, I really love the when Jared says to was it to Trade that he was trying to rationalize that he cares for Arathon out of a sense of duty, but then no, he also has a personal attachment to Arathon because of which he cares for him more. And same with Kale. I really enjoyed reading that conversation too. Or like it was part of the same discussion, but nope, it was different. It was between Jared and Sethweed when he says more than duty binds him to Arathon. So that was a nice, heartwarming conversation.
How did you like the discussion between Caradmon and Alara?
Cardamom
Oh
and
yeah, that was
that
earlier.
was
Yeah.
Oh,
one
yeah,
where
that's
the
very
three of
pivotal.
us-
That's more pivotal than you'll
No,
realize.
that was earlier. Yeah, right. That was fascinating because
Yeah.
uh, I love how he was talking to her stones to
Mm.
convince them to let him through the wards and stuff like that. I thought that was brilliant. And but the conversation they had, that was a while back. That was
Yeah, I think
chapter 2 or 3 or something like that, or 4.
I think it was in the second section, if I remember correctly. So 4 to 6, perhaps. It was the one where he tried to hint to her obliquely that she did have free will, that the order did not have full control over her. Or all she had to do was ask, maybe the fellowship to release her from the order's vows. At least that's what I read into what Satvir and Karadmon discussed before that, when he goes to talk to her. But also, I thought it was interesting that Ilera tells Karadmon that being forced to not die is making it harder on Arathon, that he might do what's right if he's released from his vow. So
Mhm.
what Ilera tells him about her insight to into Arathon, that was really interesting. It feels like the fellowship kind of ignored her advice, at least so far as we know. They haven't taken that into account at all, but maybe we'll see that play out in future.
Perspective, 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 perspective. What are the fellowships seeing that Alara might not be?
Mm.
What is the bigger picture for them? And you don't know that yet. You don't know that completely.
Yeah.
And didn't
What's
he?
what
Oh, sorry.
did he what?
Didn't he also set or reset some of his own wards when he left, or reset hers or something like that?
He would have
Mm.
left no trace that he's been there. But if you look at that conversation where Cardmon is angling to get her to ask more questions,
Mm.
and you go back to Curse of the Mistwraith, and you look at Traith's conversation with Alara, you will see that he's trying to do the same thing. And if you look at Luhane's conversation with her when he corrects the longevity,
Oh,
Mm.
man, that's right.
it's gonna. There's a subtleties in the weave of both of those scenes that you won't have seen
Mm.
because you weren't looking for it.
Nope.
They're
Yeah.
literally laying a breadcrumb trail, but she
So-
doesn't have the perspective to see. But the
Mm.
other thing that about that scene that's highly significant is you're looking at Alara's relationship with Arathon, and it's a mature relationship. She won't foster a dependency. She won't mother him. She won't baby him. She won't. She looks on that relationship as they're both equals
Mhm.
and the level of her trust. So she doesn't do what they want. They have to go to Jared to get it.
Hmm. Yeah.
There are subtleties woven into that conversation that are going to be highly significant all the way through the entire story.
Nice. Gotta go back and reread it.
Eventually, you might want to because it becomes a whole different story, and the tension points, the suspense points become different Because
Yeah.
when you see what is at stake from other angles of view, it isn't just what happens to the main characters, it's what happens to everything else.
Hmm. Yep. I don't reread a lot, but I did reread a couple of books this year, and I'm starting to think I should do that more for my favorite books, because knowing what happens, it's really interesting to see what crumbs were laid down to get there. Like what we were talking about in Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, Jared, where the first chapter he basically tells us everything that's going to happen in the book. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to reread this series for sure, and I do plan to once we get to the 10th book. 11th book.
11th, yeah, next week.
It was designed that way.
Hmm.
Some books are not designed that way, but this one was absolutely designed that way because there's so many stories interwoven into it. You won't pick up all of them, and you
Hmm.
won't pick up all of them depending on your life stage,
Hmm.
because it will read differently for every decade of life experience you get.
Yep.
It will shift.
Do so similar subject, but I'm starting a new topic. What was there any particular bit of the book that you were eager to see our reactions on, or just in general, your readers, any specific parts of the book that you're eager to see how they react?
No, I've just got to keep duct tape over my mouth because there's so many foundational things in this that are just getting ready to emerge. And one thing that prepare yourself, this was an arc start. It's going to gear
Mm,
up. The pace is going to pick up. Every single book through this arc, the pace will pick up. And just exactly the same way Warhost rang in everything in arc 2 and even back to book 1, the same thing's going to happen with Storm Fortress. It's going to build, and it's all going to explode at the same time.
Yeah, but this was a much longer arc, right? Because this goes
mm,
4
Well,
books.
you're going to worldview.
Yeah.
You're going to worldview, and it's not going to be European Middle Ages, aristocracy, any of that. All those perspectives have to change. And they don't change because I stuck a historical note in the middle of the book and told you you're going to pick it up in scenes that of action, like when Merrin is climbing the tower to see what happened to Talith. He overhears that meeting, and you learn a tremendous amount about the clans that you didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
mm,
And
Yeah.
that's going to snowball. There's a lot more you don't know.
Yeah,
I'm
and
just
it's
beginning to peel back the layers on that. And so it's going to come interwoven with the action. So it isn't just about what happens, it's how it happens and why it happens. And how much history has been forgotten depending on what faction you're talking to. Or how much history has been remembered but hidden depending which faction you're talking to.
great.
So it's all going to layer, and it's all going to impact as this thing moves forward. And I'm really, really, really happy with this discussion and this group of people. You're bringing a very wonderful perspective to this, because many people are taken aback by the gear back of the start of Arc 3, and they think the series is sprawling. I don't think you guys felt that way. You saw it building towards something bigger.
mm,
Absolutely, yeah. This book I think is, like I said, I thought it was a linchpin. Like it's really from here it's just gonna go.
yeah.
That's what it felt like when I was reading this book. Like there's so many foundations that laid down here in this book that I know are going, like you've been saying, I know are gonna come back and be like, oh, okay. Uh, and I felt that way in Curse of the Mystery too, and I get the same feeling now, and so I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, for sure.
So, if there's anything you want to share with me that you reacted to, that's always fun. But there's so much in there, and every reader brings out something different. Oh, we lost
We
Varsha.
lost Varsha.
She'll come back in, surely. She's the host. She can control that, right?
Yeah, that's under her control.
There she comes.
don't know what I did. I thought I was muting and unmuting, and then it kicked me out of the studio. I did not hit the leave studio button.
Well, you're back. So yeah, I was saying every person sees something different when they read it. They have different preferred characters. They have different preferred scenes. They have different preferred moments. You know, I had particular fun writing the way Marin destroyed the camp.
Yeah, that
That was brilliant.
was awesome. Yeah, that was outstanding. That was like some high level spycraft there. The way he pulled that off, um, and it was a lot of fun to read that section. But back to your point about getting reader reactions to different things, I think it's a brilliant how you're going to get a lot of different reactions in a lot of different sections in these books. Whereas if you're getting like in other fantasy books, if you're only getting if everybody's talking about the same exact event and nothing else about the rest of the book, then that's kind of a problem. You want to have talking about a wide variety of stuff within a single book. That means a book's has a lot to talk about. So it's been really a wonderful experience reading these because there's a lot to as well. It's been a wonderful experience talking about it with these guys because there's been a lot to unpack.
There's a lot to unpack, and I put a lot of research into the building of ships, a lot of research into sailing period ships. I've done it. The fact, you know, when they took over the fleet, the orchestration of taking over the fleet, there was a lot of intricate action in this book. So I don't get the readers that blast through it and say nothing happened.
Exactly.
There's a lot of action going on. You know how they hoodwinked the other two captains as they were taking over the fleet.
And I can picture that so vividly. Like I was filming that in my head. Like this is how I want this scene to look. It was so vivid. I could picture it perfectly.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of research, a lot of reading, and a lot of hands-on experience went into building these books.
Yeah, sure did.
Yep. I think overall this book, for me, I had Arthon didn't do as much as the other characters. So I mean, all the action or like the main pieces of action were driven by Min and Keol. So that was interesting to see like some of the other side characters come to the fore, and also the writing. I feel like you played with the environment a lot. We had the beginning was so beautiful with the spring weather and the birds were chirping and everything was pretty. I had some beautiful dreams when I was reading those parts of the book. And then we had some dreary weather when bad things were happening. So I really loved, I guess, environment and setting in this book a lot. That's what I appreciated the most as I was making my way through it. But
well, you think about the condition that Arthon was in when this book opened. He's really at a low point.
mm-hmm.
He practically destroyed himself doing what he did at Vastmark. And so to me, this is a very bad moment or a bleak moment for him. So yeah, his extended family are carrying some of the action around him.
Yep.
You'll have fun with it going forward because no character is going to sit in the same place. People change, people move forward, but how would this book have read if he didn't have that period? To me, it would have rang hollow.
Yep.
For that character to go through what happened in Talcorin and then Vastmark, and then walk out of it like nothing's no problem. You know, it's like Rand walking away from the major battle in the beginning of the Wheel of Time. And I'm like, he wasn't even dented by this. He just walked through a major war. All these people died, you know, huge battlefield. You don't walk through that and not change. And I'm not knocking another person's book. they were striving to write something different. But that's one of the complaints I have with the fantasy field in general, is major events have to impact a character and they have to come out of it different. And I just don't imagine Arthon walking off that field without damage. And you look at our people that go and fight in a war, how many years does it take to overcome PTSD, if you ever do?
Hmm. Yeah.
So this
Yeah.
is a powerful character. He's not going to not grow, and he's not going to sit in the same place. But it was a difficult period, because how do you walk away from a scenario like that and not have a certain amount of self-hate and a certain amount of feeling like, how can you ever recover?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that made perfect sense. I did expect a period of mourning after, especially after how he deals with Talcorin at the end of Curse. We spent almost what 2 chapters on the aftermath and how he deals with all the deaths and the pain that he feels, and then he feels quite a bit of guilt throughout ships and
Well,
war
then he
hosts as
murdered
well.
Kale.
Mm,
He
Yeah,
killed
yeah.
Kale.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't see the mix in this one that he's just going to walk away and be scot-free.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I that wouldn't have been true to character at all. Like it made sense. Like this is where it should have gone, and it did. That was a really good beginning of this
it's
arc
the
for this character for
consequences
me.
of a
Yeah.
powerful character exerting his abilities.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Even in a restrained way, he didn't use the ugliest tactics he could have used, as far as using some of the powers he had to cause direct harm. He did just enough to take apart that warhost that he didn't want to leave intact. He wanted to move on to something else, but he didn't want to leave that warhost intact. So he took it apart. It had a cost. It had a penalty. So yeah, there are consequences to a powerful character exerting themselves.
Yeah.
Yep.
And there are consequences to everybody in the book. Everything that happens to every character. You see what becomes of every single action they do, and it's so it's really something to a testament to the work that's act that's how life is really.
Kale didn't come out of Fastmark the same.
Yeah.
Nope,
Yeah.
not at all.
Not at all. Not Dakar didn't. None of them came
Yeah,
out the
that
same.
guy was really yeah.
I also thought it was nice that it gave an opportunity for Arathon to be taken care of. He has so much responsibility on his shoulders, and he's fighting through it. But Dakar takes such all the scenes where Dakar was watching over him and was monitoring his dreams whenever he knew that he's going to have a bad night. I loved all of them. Watching Dakar take care of Arathon, the scenes we got with Jared towards the end, I thought those were all brilliant. Like, yes, we have a main character who's technically not doing anything, but it's still a lot of building that we got for other characters and the
Not
right.
doing anything. Wait a minute.
Oh,
He was stealing ships to
oh,
keep
yeah.
the lands from going into slavery. He was running the thin edge of what he could do
Yes,
to
yes.
save those people. And he underestimated what the curse was going to do. And
Mhm.
also,
Mhm.
you've got to realize the Coriathing created a fetch. Nobody banked on them creating a fetch to make him, to trip him over the edge. So the curse is being used against him. He didn't bank on that one. He got ambushed and they got him.
Mm,
So he's not doing anything. He saved Valyrian. He's
mm,
not doing anything. The plan that he set in motion got finished by Kale, but the foundation for what he was trying to do was in place for Kale to manipulate the final yards. Anybody who took a whole crew of shipwrights captive and shoved them in the bottom of a ship is pretty stupid if they don't put them in irons, right? So, did he do nothing?
no, no, I misspoke.
He's
Sorry.
not at his peak, but I don't think he quite did nothing.
No, no, he did. No, I misspoke. I meant from how he reads a bit passive, but I agree with you. Like, in fact, these were all I'd forgotten a lot of what happens in the book, or I did not remember, but this was exactly the argument I'd constructed when we had a discussion on the forum about, like, is Arathon being passive in this book? But um he but slightly less active, I guess, is what I meant.
Watch it with him. Watch it with him, because he is not going to show you what's really going on underneath. I mean, yes, he's not in a good place here, and that's obvious. He's definitely got damage from what happened in the prior arc. But Dakar assumes nothing's going on. But did you pick up that there was a long range plan when he engaged the shipwrights in the very beginning? He went back and he got Catrick, who was against him. He got Catrick working for him behind the scenes. He's going off looking for the Paravians. They're gone sailing around the world for X number of years. Meantime, the plan Arathon laid in motion is coming to fruition. Dakar was blindsided completely.
Is it? Sorry, go ahead.
Arathon goes ashore and he begins to put it all together in Riverton with a laughing, pulling all the threads that he had set in motion. So how much of that passivity was what he wanted you to think? The character blindsided all of you guys, probably.
Yeah.
I think maybe Varsha, you're referring to Arathon had to shut down because of the Grimswood. And so
I think the last 5 chapters.
At that point he was a bit more helpless, but the beginning of the book he was very active. Yeah.
Certainly, yes. And what was I saying? Is it that readers expect that Arathon should be off building his own army to counter Lysa? And, is that...
I don't know. You're dealing with an initiate master who is never, ever going to show you all the cards. And be ready for it, because this is not a character that's going to be forthcoming and is going to tell you what he's doing unless you ask. And unless you have the perspective to understand what he's telling you, he will usually, just like Asandir, he will answer you with dead honesty. But the question is, do you have the perspective to understand what you're hearing? So this character is definitely a bit tricksy, because he will let your assumptions trip you every time. He's not going to correct you. He's an initiate master. He's not going to step outside that box of showing you what you're doing. He may create a circumstance where your own crap bites you in your ass. He's not going to become your mentor in the way that you expect. He's not going to be. So he's in a really bad place, and certain parts of his character are frayed to the bone, and you're seeing some of the damage. But has he really lost all of it? How much of your assumptions are tripping you here? So if you read through Fugitive Prince, looking through the lens of this is an initiate master that has a plan, then you might see a different contour underneath of his behavior. Remember that after he got drunk with Catrick and he went into the swamp and he's dragging Dakar with him. It's like all the time he was playing at that tavern, he was picking up leads to dismantle the slavery that was happening. He was actively in pursuit of an agenda that he wasn't going to volunteer. He shared it with Dakar, but Dakar had to see it in hindsight, what was really going on. So I would say with this character, watch what he does, because your assumptions are going to bite you in the ass, probably all the way through the series, and they probably will anyway.
Oh, and that was actually interesting how the king of Havish, I think, outlawed slavery in his kingdom.
He had to.
Yeah.
Charter law. He had to. And look at charter law functioning with a 4-way attuned high king. They don't just put a crown on the head of these guys in a coronation. And a Theron coronation is a very different piece of work. He asked for fellowship help and he got it.
Yep.
So when it comes to enforcing the compact, so you're seeing charter law function in Havish. as it is not functioning in the rest.
Not, yeah, right, exactly, yeah. So that was a good, a very interesting contrast that something's functioning somewhere and it's not working the same, especially where Lysa is involved. Um, so I'm looking to that was a very interesting contrast there.
So yeah, unless you have the perspective to see the difference, you won't see it. So we're beginning to build towards worldview. You're starting to peel back the layers. So that was a little crack in the door there to see a functional High King actually dealing with slavery is forbidden by the compact.
Right.
It's too great a violation of free will. It will create too much misery. It will affect the resonance of the planet. It will pull down everything surrounding where it occurs. And it's you're watching the fellowship go and work hand in hand with free will and the High King as to how they pulled it apart.
Very cool.
Yeah, I think Edlier was the other character I was talking about that I got really attached to in this book in just like a few pages. Anyway, I think I had all my questions. Did you have any other things to discuss? Chibipoe, we haven't heard from you. What were your favorite parts of the book or the last 5 chapters?
I liked lots of the book. I've mostly been quiet because you two have had lots of really neat stuff to talk about. So I was like, I'll just let you guys go. I think back to when I first read it, the bit once we got in the Grimswood and Fellerin's talking to Dakar about dragons and it hadn't been explicitly stated before that, but where it talked about how that was just kind of mind blowing when Fellerin's like, and a live dragon could dream more strongly, and Dakar's like, yeah, to reweave the known fabric of creation. And I was like, whoa, that's again one of those moments where I'm just like, man, the scale of this just kind of sneaks up on you. Because I'm like, I don't know any other dragons anywhere else that do that. So that was pretty mind blowing.
They all thought in Curse of the Mistwraith, those little things they met in the past, that was the dragons. The fire breathing, the Kadrim.
Yeah.
No, it's a little bit bigger than that. It's a lot bigger than that. So you're starting to see again the little crack in the door, and that door will get wider and wider and wider.
Lots to look forward to.
Yep, you do. Well, I did prepare you some
yes,
fun stuff. Let me see.
Oh.
What did I put? Where did I put? Oh, it fell. The cat's knocked it on the floor. That's why. I'm going to go into a little bit of the history of Korith.
Oh yes, I love a good history of a place.
Korith was originally part of another continent called Morover, or the Westlands Kingdom, and it vanished under the waves in Second Age 3668. In the Second Sundering, what they call the Second Sundering. If you look at the way the mountains on the continent, there's a big, huge X of fault lines, crisscrosses the continent in a big X.
Oh yeah.
So it is not a stable context. Thera is not a stable geologic world at all. So Morover went under the waves, and if you look at the ancient map, Korith is right here. It's the last bit of the continent of Morover that's still above the waves. Let me see if I can get better light on that. Probably can't see it. It's better when it's daylight.
Look at those notes.
There's notes all over it. So Korith is right here between these two bays. So that's the last bit that's still above the waves. So I will give you a bit of some history here. And we got to go back pretty far to understand what happened there. Meth spawn. You know that dragons dream and they reweave creation, and you know that drake spawn are things that were left over from where they had their conflicts or they had their agendas and they created things. So things like Sirdwin and Kadrim were actually birthed to attack other dragons' clutches. There were territorial fights, huge ones, and a lot of them happened on Moraver. There were definitely feuding dragons on that continent. So in first stage, 681, there was a ruin and scorching of Moraver. The major city, which was on the coast where they first settled, was Dalgair, was put into ruins there. And there was a huge ballad. The Athenian master bard Amak's great lament for Moraver was sung because of all that damage that happened then. So in 776 in the first age, they set up a watch at Korth. They built a huge tower that was on top of a huge mountain, and they could actually see both coasts. And they built that to warn the mainland of Kraken attacks. Kraken were drake spawn, and they were in the Westland Sea, and they were literally decimating the civilizations, the Paravian civilizations on the coast of the mainland. And they were also attacking the Westland Kingdom. So there was a huge watchtower built there. In 778, the Methurian, which were mentioned in Chips of Maria, remember the hate wraith that gave rise to the spawn in Myrtlevane Mire? Well, those guys were still going at that time. They are the elder nasty cousins of the Eots. Much bigger, much nastier. And what they did was they would possess a creature, they would genetically alter it, they would interbreed it with another creature to create something else. So they also were drake spawn. All these things that I'm talking about were created by the dragons. So in 778, the Methurian emerged in Myrtlevane Mire, and they were called the hate wraiths. They were not good. They were designed to destroy things. And their ultimate creation was spawned in 800, and that was the Great Githorn. And it was the worst scourge that attacked the Paravian races ever to be hatched by the dragons or the Methuria, the hate wraiths. So what they did to create that guy was they possessed a clutch of dragon eggs. They altered the embryo, and something hatched out, which was massive. It was winged. It also was semi-aquatic. It had some ability to dream like a dragon would, not to the degree that a dragon would, but it was able to slow down time. It was able to stall time or stretch it or speed it up. So it was able to bend time. So it made it really hard to kill. In 802, there were Kraken assaults that winnowed the defenders and forced a hard-pressed retreat. This would have been on Moraver, and there was a dragon called Skenavarchel, who was the companion to Kianar Sunlord. So Kianar worked with the dragon. He was a centaur. And during that assault, he broke off a spine from his dorsal, and that was created into a horn. And they fashioned that horn after another horn that was created several years earlier. And that horn was able to drive the Mespon into retreat. And that was called Parahane's Glory, that horn. So Skenavarichel's spine was given to Kianar Sunlord. Now they had two horns that could do the same thing. So 805, the reprieve of the horns, both of those two horns were used to drive the Krakens into the deep. So there was a temporary standoff. In 811, Korth was rebuilt from ruin from the last time around, and the Mariner's Beacon was lit on that mountaintop, and they began also to keep watch there. In 812, back in Myrtlevane Swamp, remember I said there was the hate wraiths twisted a clutch of dragon eggs? When those guys became molts or semi-grown, those dragons don't have sex until they mate. They sexualize when they mate. So there was molt madness attacked that bunch of molts that damaged Klets, and they wreak havoc and they damaged the wards that were keeping the crap in Myrtlevane Mire contained. realize there was no Fellowship of Seven at this time, only dragons and only Paravians. In 812, so in 815, those things busted loose. There was a massacre at Liorn. Old Cyrenia went down in flames in San Pashir. The defenders of the etheric web there were under assault. In 816, the Battle of Retribution waged across Shand, Orvandirian Plain. That battle shifted the landscape. It literally altered how the landscape was because of the dragons dreaming. They were fighting. So there were wars. Methelus Lake was expanded at that time, and Myrtlevain got bigger eastwards. So things changed back at that time. If I showed you the ancient maps, they would not look the same as what you're looking at now because of a lot of these wards. In 823, the warded wall at Myrtlevain was actually breached by the Great Gathorn. It tore it apart. In 824, the rise of the Great Gathorn, the years of predation began, and that began the breaking of the Dragon Protectorate. The Dragon Protectorate arose because the dragons were damaging too much. And the dragons sat down and they had a first dreaming, and they dreamed the Paravians. So asked Gift of the World to heal what the dragons were damaging. The Paravians were sent in. All through the first stage, the Paravians were getting killed left and right because it was impossible or difficult to heal all this mess that was going on because of all this drake spawn was born, and they weren't even completely whole souls. They were damaged. They were not complete intelligences. So what you had was the Dragon Protectorate formed to defend the Paravians, and there were rogue dragons who did not subscribe to that. So they were battling against the Protectorate dragons. So there was one faction of dragons that said, we want to wipe out the Paravians. There was another faction saying, we dreamed them into being to heal this mess. We're going to defend them. So what happened was, in 824, when the Gathorn busted out, everything rose at once. The breaking of the Dragon Protectorate begins. The Mithurian Reign of Terror begins, where all the hate wraiths and all those creatures were at large across the Thera and actively going after order. So the Paravian wards holding the pass through the sky shoals was broken. The defenders were slaughtered. Darkling was put under siege. In 826, there was an assault on Kinnesteg. The Drakebond drive the Paravians across the Marin. Paravian defeat at Erdane by the Kadrim. Kianar Sunlord and the Centaur Legion were routed. The hope was lost temporarily, and there were a lot of deaths by despair. Haven Hall at Iser, which was one of the earliest strongholds for the Paravians, was burned down. Paravian records and artifacts were barely spared. They were pulled out of there and hidden in the Skelson Caves in the east. The deaths of the dragon Sharkatraz, who was one of the originals that formed the Protectorate, he fell wing-torn battling the Gathorn. The Gathorn was wounded, but the Sleared Lewin were still going strong, and they pour into Dan Rem, and there was a slaughtering at will. So Atheman at that time was besieged. The Guardian Protectorate was in complete disarray. In 627, the siege and the ruin of Atheman for the second time. Atheman was destroyed. It was destroyed like 6 times before. What you see is the ruin now. The second fall, only the towers were spared, and the Paravians that were there were driven out. And there was a huge last great rout there where the towers were abandoned. There was a vault under the citadel which allowed the Paravians to escape by river. And there was a last stand of the Protectorate in retreat across the Arwent River to protect the Paravians that left Atheman as it fell. The unicorns were in refuge in Arathura, and it was so dire at that point, it was believed that they might retreat into Athalie, where they came from, the vortex at Athalie, rather than see them all die in bloodshed. So in 827, the Dragon Protectorate was completely sundered. And at that moment, what was left of the dragons who wanted the Paravians to survive joined with the Paravian Council, and they formed what was called the Concord of Alliance between dragons and Paravians. And there was a huge meeting at Korth because the continent was under such siege. And at Korth, that Concord of Alliance dedicated themselves to Paravian survival and the Wheel of the Mysteries. And that was when the second dreaming happened. And the second dreaming was where the dreamer queen dragon Vukaramish got together with Seskashtiel, who was one of the elders, and they led the quest to decide to hammer the Drakon back into submission. So the second dreaming brought what they hoped would be a destructive force to hold the line so that the Paravians wouldn't continue to get slaughtered. And what met their dreaming, the exact resonance that they dreamed meshed with the exact resonance of the Fellowship Sorcerers, what became the Fellowship Sorcerers. And that's what brought them to what they're. So the Paravian Council and the dreaming of the dragons at Korith brought about Second Age Year 1, which is the arrival of the Fellowship of Seven.
Wow. That sounds like a whole nother.
And this is just a fraction, I'm gonna had to, because there's millions of things happening all the breadth of the continent that I couldn't go into, and there's more kinds of drake spawn than I've even mentioned here. I just limited it to what was mentioned in the book.
Oh wow.
There were literally hundreds of different denominations of drake spawn. There were sirens, there were krakens, there were things that lived underwater, and there were things that lived, and some of them were exterminated, and some of them are restrained by what's called an accord, where the Fellowship said, we'll exterminate you unless you agree to hold the line. And so there were treaties forged during the Second Age, and some of them were exiled.
So the dreaming of the drakes, is that local to Athena, or are they sort of the controllers of the space-time fabric in this universe?
No, they're not the controllers of the space-time fabric in the universe. They believe they are. What dragons think and what other entities that are intelligent think don't necessarily agree. What the dragons can do is they can manipulate the space-time fabric of the universe. No strings attached unless they restrain themselves. They can change anything. They can alter the fabric of reality at will, and they can create the fabric of reality at will, but they are not the ultimate arbiters for the whole rest of the universe. No, they would think they are. So if you asked a dragon about the Fellowship Sorcerers, the Fellowship would say, we are our own intelligence, and we existed before you, and we exist after you. If you asked a dragon, they say, we created you.
Nice. And
so this will come forward as a series. So you're sort of getting a snapshot of some things that will come into play later on. But yeah, they dreamed the exact resonance. So just like you make a resonant healing, it alters reality. That dreaming of the exact resonance, it's like an attractant. That point of reality is going to be the same because the resonance was precisely matched. And that's what pulled the Fellowship, literally yanked them out of the reality they were in and dropped them. Starship and all, boom, Crater Lake and Athera. That's where they ended up. Because the dragons plucked that resonance straight out of reality. So they didn't create it, but did they? They created the impact, they created the event. But did they invent the Fellowship? The Fellowship would say, no, we had lives before this and have lives after this. But to a dragon, they don't differentiate that.
Interesting. I thought they were in a different part of the same universe, but you said they were plucked out of their reality. That's interesting. So
their time-space continuum, wherever it was they were. We're talking a relativistic universe here.
Okay. That's good to know.
Awesome. That's very cool to take a behind the scenes look at that. That's awesome.
It is. It really is.
It took me the afternoon to pull those threads out of what else, everything else was happening. I mean, that whole siege of Atheman was massive, and it happened again in the Third Age. In fact, that's when Caradmon lost his physical form. Was one of those sieges. Themon's history alone is huge and deep. It's been wrecked like 6 times. stripped down to flattened. But remnants of some of those older layers are still there.
Nice.
Yeah. That was a really cool snippet. Thanks for that, Janny. We really appreciate it, and hopefully our listeners do too. Um, do we have anything else to discuss before we um, close it out?
On to Grand Conspiracy.
Yeah,
Yes.
and it's
Conspiracy
going to
is,
open with a bang.
yeah, it's gonna knock your
It's
socks.
not gonna take a breath. I'm having so much fun watching you guys enjoy this because as I was creating it, it was so silent. There was no internet. There was no,
Yeah.
and Fugitive Prince was the moment where the publisher pulled all the support out from under it. There was a big kerfluffle with independent distributing. All the editors left. Then there was a massive merger happened at Grand Conspiracy. So at that point, this series that was going strong that people used to mention in the same breath as Malazan, it dropped off the radar. And now people go, I never even heard of it. Where's this been? It's been here all along, just without any advertising money and without any effort put forward. It's very hard for people to know it's there. So I appreciate what you're doing to no end, because if it's not going to die in obscurity, a lot of what you're doing now is going to make that difference. So it's cool. I get to watch you having fun with it. It's not just me cackling over a keyboard, for decades and decades.
Yeah, I know, I'm really glad that you enjoy our discussions. It's we've been having a blast discussing the books, as you can probably tell from listening
What I
to it.
really love is if you go back and you look at your discussion of Curse of the Mistwraith, you're all going, I'm not sure I get any of this. I'm not sure I don't know what this means yet. And now you're beginning to zero in on what you're really looking for. And
Mm,
it's absolutely starting to work. So I'm
nice.
impressed that not only did you stick with it, but the degree of focus you're bringing to the read is totally changed from when you started book one. And that's one of the biggest stumbling blocks is people step into the series and they don't realize what it is. If
Mm,
they had a little bit of inkling of what they were looking at and not to speed through it, not to skim it, not to just quick see what happens, to bring that focus to bear on it. It's rewarding me to say, yeah, it really does work. It really is all there. It just needs the right kind of attention.
mm,
Yeah, and we're getting some good guidance, and I think we're all helping each other be better readers as well. So it's been fun.
it- yeah, it's been. I have to say I've been reading differently because of the group discussions, because I'm paying so much more attention than I probably would have. Like the writing, of course, forces you to, because it's hard for me to skim read this because I have to pay attention to the sentences, to what's being said. But also the fact that I'm going to go discuss it later, I pay a lot more attention. I'm like, oh, that's something that I'd want to bring up, or
Yeah,
something to ask if
but,
others noticed. And
but it makes
that's
the
really cool.
experience more rewarding
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's
It
great.
does. It really
Yeah.
does. Yeah. Yeah. So
So
it
yeah, you said there's not enough Alair in this book, or you want more Arthon. Believe me, it's coming.
nice.
It's coming.
All
It's
right.
coming.
Excellent. So much to look forward to. And we'll have the schedule up on the Patreon forum. We haven't decided when we'll start Grand Conspiracy yet, but those of you following along with us, the schedule should be up on the Patreon forum a few days from now. I think we'll start a thread about it, discussing when we'll start. So yeah, consider joining the Patreon forum if you haven't already. And Jared, would you like to start us off with outros now?
Sure. I'm Jared, and find me at the Fantasy Thinker YouTube channel, where I talk about a lot of fantasy books, and I talk about these books a lot. And you can also find me on the Page Chewing forums.
And guess we'll go counterclockwise. Yes, Janny, would you like to go next?
Pretty easy to find. I'm the only Janny Wurts in the world, so you can find my website. I'm on the Page Chewing forum. I've still got a Twitter account. I will be waking up my Blue Sky account after New Year's when I have a little bit more time. I do post some reviews on Goodreads pretty much sporadically as I read something that I want to comment on. And I do breeze through the Reddit forum, the Reddit fantasy forum occasionally. So I'm around. And if you haven't joined the page chewing forum, it is a fantastically creative, tolerant, kind, amazing group of people that Steve has gathered there. And it's a really special corner of the internet. I do recommend it. And they have all kinds of group reads going on. They have all kinds of content happening, people doing videos, people writing books, people running creative threads. It goes in all directions, comics, movies. There's something for everybody there in the genre. So I really treasure what Steve is doing. And if you haven't joined, it's simple and there's no pressure. It's a great place to hang out.
Agreed.
Yeah, it is one of my favorite places to be. And Chibipoe.
Yep. Chibipoe, I can be found on Page Chewing as well. I'm also on Twitter, and as well as a small presence on YouTube. Mostly, making playlists of other people's videos. But there I am. So, and Varsha.
Cool. Yeah, and I'm Varsha. You can find me on my YouTube channel, Reading by the Rainy Mountain. I haunt the page chewing forums like constantly. You can find me there, and the About page has other ways to reach me. We will be meeting again in a few weeks to discuss Grand Conspiracy. We'll probably take a bit of a break. So if you are a bit behind on the reading group and would like to keep up with us, we will probably take a break. So do consider joining us. The final book is going to be out in May, and I think the dates have been fixed so that US release is the same as
Yeah, I
UK.
think it's May 23rd or something like that, or 20. It's towards the end of May, but the pre-orders are up now.
Yes.
Definitely run and do your pre-order because that will affect how the publisher treats the book going forward.
Nice.
But yeah, you should be able to find it. And if you can't find it on your local venue, let me know because then I'll scream and yell until that gets fixed. But yeah, they did correct the simultaneous release. Thank goodness. Thank goodness.
Nice. So yeah, as of May 24th, this will be a completed 10-book long series. Lots to read, lots of fun stuff to discuss. We will see everyone in a few weeks. Thank you so much for listening. Bye.
And one thing on the new book, at the end of it, when I got to the end of the page proofs, there were extra pages because the signatures to round out the signatures. So there was actually 3 blank pages, and I requested that they print all of the lyrics for the Master Bard's Lament for the Widows of Deer Kenton Vale. There's actually 6 verses to that, and only 3 appear in Fugitive Prince.
Oh, okay.
So if we're lucky, they will go through and put that there because why have a blank page? Makes no sense. You can find it in the Paravia wiki, and you can also find it on another discussion of Fugitive Prince that another group had. Was the one with PL and Under the Radar books and
Angie. Yeah.
Angie's hosting it, so it would be on Angie's channel. I believe I did a read aloud of that one at the end of that was the special feature for the Fugitive Prince discussion, so you can find the lyric to that complete.
Yeah, that's a really beautiful poem. So yeah, do check it out. I think it's on the website. We did talk about it briefly in one of our discussions, but yes, that would be cool to see it in the final book. So yeah, thanks everyone for listening. We'll see you in a few weeks. Bye.